Hello, guys. Welcome to the show. I hope everyone is doing just fine. So, let's run along with some of the major stories making the headlines in Africa. African countries aren't borrowing too much, they are paying too much for debt. Yeah, this headline is saying that actually African countries are not borrowing too much money, are not taking in too much debt, but rather they are paying so much just to service their debt. They are paying so much for interest for the debt they collect. And this has been a problem in Africa for a while. And we all have realized that the international financial institutions like the IMF and the World Bank have been so and has been disproportionately unfavorable to Africa. Like we pay 4 times more than the Europeans or the Americans for the same amount of money. For example, if we go to the IMF or the World Bank and we borrow $1,000, if America or any country in Europe collect the same amount of money, which is $1,000, and pay $1 for interest, we in Africa will pay $4. That is highly disproportional, and that has been a major problem in Africa. We are finding it more and more difficult to service our debt. So let's continue what the article is saying. There is renewed concern about the sustainability of rising debt levels in many African countries. Much of this debt is being incurred through foreign currencies denominated Euro bonds issued on international financial markets. The total value of Euro bonds issued between 2018 and 2019 was more than the value of all bonds sold between 2003 to 2016. African governments are issuing and listing their Euro bonds on established international debt markets, usually London and Irish Stock Exchange. African governments would venture offshore a lot less if domestic bonds market were active and liquid. Yeah, this has always been a problem in Africa, and we are still hoping that a solution can be brought to this issue. So let's move on to the next story for today. Lopsided global financial system leaves many African states in debt distress. Yeah, many African countries are in debt distress. Some of them have already defaulted on their debt obligations, and many are finding it difficult to service their debt and loans due to the pandemic. The World Bank says that 24 of the world's lowest income economies will spend 21.5 billion on financing their external public debt in 2024. According to the bank's International Debt Report 2023, in 2022, the latest year for which data are available, low and middle income countries paid a record 443.5 billion to service their external public and publicly guaranteed debt. The report was published just as Ethiopia became Africa's third nation after Ghana and Zambia to default on sovereign bonds in 3 years. Addis defaulted on a 33 million interest payment. You can see how this whole debt crisis is just making its way through Africa. From Zambia to Ghana, from Ghana now to Ethiopia. This is what happens when you borrow so much, when you collect from anyone who is willing to give. Sometimes you ask yourself that, can these leaders in Africa actually prove to us what they have used all the money they have collected, they have borrowed to do? Africa has a serious problem of mismanagement. We go out there, we take out loans, and we are unable to show what we have done with the loans. All the debts we carry, we are unable to show what we did with everything. And now, because we do not invested whatever we collected wisely, we are finding it very difficult to pay back the interest on those debts. But let's move on to the next story for today. African countries that have defaulted on debt repayment. Yes, a growing number of African countries have found themselves caught in the challenging web of debt distress, a predicament exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic and global economic downturn. I have heard a lot of people just put all the blames on COVID-19, which in my own opinion, I think it is not supposed to be that way, because if you go out there taking loans and credit and whatever without really having a clear path on how you're going to pay it back, you're going to find yourself in situations like this. Debt is not necessarily a bad thing nor a good thing. It all depends on how you invest those debt. If you take them and then you squander them, when the time comes to pay them back, you will be in a very, very big problem. Mismanagement in Africa is a very serious issue. In 2020, Zambia opted to bow out of a 42.5 million euro bond repayment, becoming the first African nation to default on its debt in the COVID-19 era. The copper-rich country had been facing mounting debt challenges from several years, exacerbated by a combination of factors, including a decline in commodity prices, economic management, and the impact of the global health crisis. You see, so when you are in so much debt, when the least thing happens, you find yourself in a lot of trouble. Too much debt can be a very, very terrible thing. Let's move on to the next country, that is Ghana. Last December, Ghana suspended payment on most of its 28.4 billion external debt, leading to an effective default as the country grapples with addressing the substantial balance of payment defaults. The finance minister has stated its decision not to service debts, including Eurobonds, commercial loans, and the majority of bilateral loans, describing the move as an interim emergency measures. Ghana also is facing a lot of problems. Actually, they got a bailout from the World Bank, and they are still struggling to see how they can stabilize their economy. Let's see Ethiopia. On Tuesday, Ethiopia marked Africa's third default in 3 consecutive years as it missed a 33 million coupon payment on its sole international government bond. The East African country has been contending with the increased financial difficulties arising from the effects of COVID-19 pandemic and a concluded 2-year civil war in November 2022. Originally scheduled for payment on December 11, Ethiopia technically had until Tuesday to fulfill the 33 million coupon payment, courtesy of a 14-day grace period embedded in the 1 billion bond agreement. According to two sources familiar with the situation, bondholders had not been paid the coupon as of the end of Friday, December 22, the last international banking working day before the grace period expires. They're not going to pay anything. They don't have money to pay. This is what happened when you are in so much debt and the listing happened to you. You are unable to pay anything. Too much debt is bad.